welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's workshop titled Well-Designed Equitable Home Energy Upgrades, Best Practices and Strategies, hosted by EPA's Energy Star and the Residential Retrofits for Energy Equity, or R2E2 for short. My name is Stephanie Sosa Coulter, and I'm the Deputy Director for R2E2 at the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, or ACEEE for short. Again, we're so happy to have you here today and looking forward to sharing the best practices that R2E2 has identified for creating and implementing home energy upgrade programs. So you can go to the next slide. So before we get into the content of today's workshop, I'd like to go over some housekeeping to ensure a safe and productive learning environment for all. We are recording this webinar and we'll be making it available to all registrants within a few business days. You'll receive that via email, and it will also be posted to the EPA website. Please keep your microphone on mute during the presentation, but you can definitely turn on your video. And to ask a question during the webinar, you can submit your questions via the chat button at the bottom of the screen. And to use the chat to engage in respectful and productive discussion with other participants. So please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know what organization you're coming from, and also like anything that you'd like to share, what you're looking forward to learning today. And we also have a code of conduct. R2E2 will not tolerate behaviors that cause harm or disrupt the learning environment. So please direct a message to Carolyn Conant if you feel unsafe in the space. Disruptive participants may be removed from the webinar. So thank you so much for your participation. And now I just want to show you the faces that have made this all happen. So we have headshots of EPA, ICF, and R2E2 staff who made this workshop a reality, and also the practitioners who are going to share a bit about their programs are going to be highlighted during the presentation and are also going to have the chance to answer your questions during the Q&A, and also facilitate breakout rooms in the second part of the workshop, which is really exciting. So next slide. Now to provide some context on the hosts for the workshop series, R2E2, or Residential Retrofits for Energy Equity, provides deep technical assistance to state, local, and tribal governments, as well as community-based organizations to jumpstart energy upgrades for single-family and multifamily affordable housing, especially in frontline communities. These retrofits will lower utility bills, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, improve residents' health, create good-paying local jobs, and help mitigate racial inequity. R2E2 is a partnership of the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, Elevate, Emerald Cities Collaborative, and HRNA Advisors. And Energy Star is the government-backed symbol for energy efficiency. The blue Energy Star label provides simple, credible, and unbiased information that consumers and businesses rely on to make well-informed decisions. Next slide. So we've provided R2E2's infographic on how building upgrades benefit underserved communities. I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide, but the impacts of building upgrades include increases in climate resilience, improved health and comfort, increased affordability, a strengthened local economy, and a promotion of racial equity. These slides, as I mentioned, are going to be shared, and so is the recording once the workshop is over. So please take advantage of all of the resources that we have provided, such as this one. Next slide. And if you are interested in learning more about R2E2 and would like to stay informed via updates, please do so by signing up via the link that I will be providing in the chat once I'm done with my introduction. And if you would like to be considered for help from R2E2 to plan, launch, implement, or scale your energy upgrade program for low-income housing, you can fill out our 10-minute survey via the link. Again, I will be adding another link in the chat. And we're hoping to provide small grants to participating communities in addition to technical assistance. We particularly encourage those who have completed some level of planning for their upgrade program to complete the survey. Please note that this is technical assistance and it pertains to programs, not individual buildings. So now I'm going to pass the baton on to Taylor Jansell from Energy Star, who I have had the privilege of working with during this workshop series. And she's going to share some information about the amazing work that she's doing with Energy Star. So Taylor, on to you.
Hi, thanks, Stephanie. So if you don't know about Energy Star, it's operated out of the US EPA. I hail from the products group, and so this is all under the products umbrella, this work to really help advance our energy efficient product portfolio and clean energy in an equitable way. Hang on a second. And this is part of a new initiative under the Biden administration that we are calling the Energy Star Home Upgrade. So Energy Star Home Upgrade are 6 impactful things you can do with Energy Star products to make big changes to your home. They are the main big ones, the costly ones, the transformative ones. We're talking about clean heat and cooling and smart thermostats and water heaters and attic insulation, getting your home ready to handle full electric loads and windows. So on average, this package can save approximately $500 a year. Of course, that varies depending on where you are, but this is really to advance clean energy goals and help educate consumers about these technologies and how they can benefit them on their path to the clean energy future. Under this program, we have an Energy Star Home Upgrade Service Provider Partnership. This is a new partnership with Energy Star to really engage with hand-holding through these major product decisions. So this is a partnership for organizations that serve as a concierge or a navigator through this process, helping with energy assessments in the home and securing contractors, possibly helping cover costs or financing to really help assist folks with this process. And we do have one of our case studies and practitioners today is one of our charter partners, that is the Philadelphia Energy Authority, doing great work to help people on this through this partnership and on the clean energy transition. So just a little bit more about the partnership. It's a national platform. We are doing campaign work. We are supporting this partnership with best practices like this. We are supporting the whole marketing infrastructure across the country and in different regions to leverage all of our partners, our vast stakeholder network, to advance this productive collaboration to help people transform their homes and make these upgrades. So we are doing national campaign work for consumer education to pair with this partnership and work hand in hand with our partners to get this work done. And today, this workshop is part of a series of workshops that we are doing under a resource center for supporting community-based organizations and practitioners that are really going out there and helping people make these changes to their home. This workshop series, this is the second in our series. You can learn more about it at the energystar.gov/equitable upgrades. And we're so pleased to have R2E2 helping us with connecting to all of you and helping advance all these best practices and in community where we break out together and get to share in person. So thank you all for being here. Thank you to R2E2 as well. This is a quick recap of the full workshop series. The next one's in September about centering affordability in low-income home electrification programs. We'll talk about health and safety, and then we'll talk about maximizing incentives for no cost or hopefully debt-free home upgrades. Pass back to Stephanie.
Yeah, thank you, Taylor. So now I want to introduce today's presenters. So we have Ian Becker, and he is a manager for R2E2 at ACEEE. He played a major role in the creation of the R2E2 retrofit playbook, which was launched in June of this year. And you will learn more about the retrofit playbook during today's presentation. We also have Diana Morales, and she is a senior research analyst at ACEEE. Diana leads research on equitable energy efficiency policies and programs, and also does technical assistance. And lastly, we have Jasmine Ma, who is a senior research analyst at ACEEE, who studies policies, programs, and funding resources that improve human health and energy efficiency. This team has contributed so much to R2E2, and we are so grateful to have them sharing their knowledge with us today. So, Ian, I will pass it on to you to talk about the R2E2 retrofit playbook.
Thanks, Stephanie. Hi, everyone. So yeah, thanks again for joining us today to discuss strategies for designing equitable home energy upgrade programs. First, if I can just ask everyone to respond to the poll that will pop up on your screen. We're trying to get a sense of where people are joining us from today. So we'll just take a little bit of time to answer this poll. Looks like we've got a lot of folks in the Northeast and a lot of folks in the West, a lot of folks in the Midwest, so a pretty good range. And even some folks from Canada. Great, so I think it looks like everyone has responded. I don't see any new responses coming in, so we'll move on. If we can go to the next slide, please. So even aside from the poll results, we've created this map to show where the registrants for this workshop are based. So as you can see, though these programs differ a lot depending on the region or jurisdiction you're working in, the question of how to design home energy upgrade programs that are truly equitable is something that is concerning program administrators and other stakeholders, really regardless of where they're working or living. So the best practices and case studies in the playbook are really meant to be applicable on a nationwide basis. Next slide, please. And so this brings us to our learning goals today. First, in this workshop, we want to identify the best practices that are highlighted in the R2E2 playbook. We also want to give an overview of that resource so that you're oriented to it and can use it outside of this workshop with ease. And finally, we want to provide a platform to discuss some of the case studies included in the playbook and do a bit of a deeper dive on them. So this is today's workshop agenda. So from around 125 to 255, I'll give an overview of the playbook. We'll go over some best practices and case studies. There'll be audience polls and a Q&A, going over the best practices that we cover. Then from around 2:55 to 3:10, we'll have a 15-minute break so folks can just catch their breath a little bit. And then from 3:10 to 3:40, we'll have an interactive discussion of best practices with our field experts who are working in these programs and the case studies that we highlight around the country. And then from about 3:40 to 3:55, we'll wrap up with audience polls and links to other resources. Next slide, please. Okay, great. So this takes us to the R2E2 playbook itself. We launched the R2E2 playbook in late June and have received a great response so far from folks that have been using it. I guess before we dive into the resource, it might be helpful to take a step back and really think about the problem that we're trying to address with this resource. So on this slide, this just includes some high-level information about some of the issues that we want to address. Our initiative in particular, we really want to encourage the creation and scaling of building upgrade programs that go beyond the status quo. We think programs should be community-led, easy to use, and achieve lower energy bills in addition to greenhouse gas emission reductions, racial and social equity goals, improved health outcomes, and local economic development. Because as we know, the status quo is not great around the country. Far too many low and moderate income households have not reaped the benefits of past energy efficiency efforts. For instance, as is highlighted on the slide, around 67% of low-income households face a high energy burden because they spend more than 6% of their income on energy bills. Of the subset of households, around 60% actually face around 6% actually face a severe energy burden, which is when a household spends more than 10% of its income on energy bills. While roughly 27.5% of all US households have low incomes, these households receive only about 13% of spending from existing energy efficiency programs administered by utilities. So it's really clear that new approaches are needed, and we believe that community-driven planning can really help reimagine how we design and implement solutions for these cohorts. Next slide, please. So this brings us to the playbook. What you're seeing right now is a screenshot of the landing page of R2E2playbook.org. It's designed as a tool to help program administrators or other stakeholders around the country, whether they're CBOs, local government offices, or private entities. It's designed to help them establish, improve, or expand building energy upgrade programs for low and moderate income housing in their communities. This resource contains recommendations that apply for both subsidized and unsubsidized housing, importantly. So how does it work? Well, it's organized into 3 sections. Section 1 is called Planning and Equitable Engagement Process, focuses on stakeholder and community engagement. Section 2 is called Identifying Your Community Upgrade Priorities. And Section 3 is called Crafting a Well-Designed and Equitable Program. Each of these sections provides foundational information related to building energy upgrades, and then is followed by 12 actions that R2E2 recommends program administrators take. Next slide, please. So on this slide, you can see the 12 actions that the playbook recommends. In the resource, each of these actions leads to more granular best practices, which are then paired with relevant case studies and additional tools. So that's kind of how the journey map of the resource works. So while these actions themselves may seem broad at first glance, we've structured the playbook to enable you to identify very specific approaches to taking these actions that may work well for your community. So at this point, we can zoom in on how you navigate the playbook and follow that process. Next slide, please. So on this slide, you're looking at the actions and best practices for Section 3, Crafting a Well-Designed and Equitable Program. The first action in this section is Action 6, Create an Easy Program Intake, Participation, and Support Process. And then this action leads to best practices, as you can see on the first in the slide, which is related to the one-stop shop approach. So this begins to show how the playbook leads you from high-level recommendations to more specific approaches. One of our recommended actions is to create an easy-to-use program. Then this page begins to operationalize that recommendation through our introduction of one-stop shops, or the concept of one-stop shops and what they include. And then because we think this program design is an ideal approach for braiding and stacking funding, which is so important these days, you can then, continue on to the case studies and related tools that are paired with that best practice. They're designed to give you critical context and guidance so that you can ensure that your programs follow these best practices regardless of the jurisdiction that they may be in. Next slide, please. And then on this side, you can see the 2 case studies that we pair with this particular best practice. So the first is Philadelphia's Built to Last program, which functions as a one-stop shop that uses a single application and a no wrong door approach to coordinating services and program eligibility across multiple agencies. We're very lucky today to be joined by Alon and Emily from the Philadelphia Energy Authority to answer some of your questions about this program and help facilitate the breakout sessions. And we'll get to that portion a bit later on in the workshop. The second case study that we highlight is the Energy Smart program in Boulder County, Colorado. This program pairs participants with energy advisors, a single point of contact who can help identify the best upgrades and recommended contractors to program users. So, you can see the playbook, or you can use the playbook to not only learn about what these programs are, what they include, but also how those approaches might be adapted in your own communities. These two programs are both fantastic. They use a lot of the best practices identified in the playbook. If you would like to learn more about either of these programs in particular, you can find a link to their websites in this section of the playbook. And then for Built to Last specifically, I invite you to ask questions during the breakout sessions. Next slide, please. And then in addition to highlighting many programs across the country, the playbook also presents tools and resources that may be helpful as you consider how to include these best practices in your programs. So for instance, this slide shows the additional tools that we've included for Action 3, identify program focus areas. One of the best practices for taking this action is to use community data and community priorities and establish clear racial equity, housing, workforce development, health, and environmental justice goals for both engagement activities and program outcomes. And as you can see on this slide, the playbook leads you to numerous tools that can be helpful in setting these goals. So the tools highlighted here include a guide from Emerald Cities Collaborative on incorporating workforce development into climate-related planning processes, NREL's Comstock and ResStock tools to model the impacts of building technologies in different communities, and a lot of other tools from federal agencies to help administrators make data-driven decisions related to energy goals and program planning. Next slide, please. So those are just a few of the examples of the programs and tools that the playbook contains. There's a lot more to delve into. The 12 high-level actions are paired with over 40 best practices, which are then connected to over 90 case studies and over 120 resources and additional tools. So you can spend a lot of time with this resource during program planning, and we certainly hope that you do. Next slide, please. And just quick before I pass it off, as you navigate the playbook, if you have any questions or suggestions, or you'd like to follow up with us for any reason, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can message us via a tab on our website that is titled Stay Informed. And now we're going to hear from my colleague, Diana, who's going to dive deeper into the first 6 actions that we include in the playbook. So thanks, everyone. And Diana, you can take it away.
Cool. Thanks, Ian. So hi, everyone. So I'm going to be covering the first 6 recommended actions in the playbook, as Ian just mentioned. Next slide, please. So in the playbook, we recommend to first begin with a landscape analysis. And simply put, a landscape analysis is a scan of existing opportunities and gaps. So a landscape analysis can be helpful for programs to determine existing opportunities, find existing tools and strategies to avoid reinventing the wheel, and identify opportunities for collaboration and relationship building. So the analysis should cover things like relevant existing policies, programs, and stakeholders, the existing building stock in your locality, the relationship between communities and local governing entities, the current energy efficiency workforce landscape, and the capacity limits of potential partners. So a few case studies and examples of how this has been done. We highlight here a tool from GreenLink Analytics. GreenLink Analytics is a nonprofit focused on energy data, and they developed a data visualization tool called GEM, where you can explore the potential relationships between things like historical redlining and current energy issues. And in this specific case study, they were focusing on residents in Atlanta. Something else that we wanted to highlight here is ecosystems mapping, which identifies potential anchor partner organizations with the experience, expertise, track record, and capacity to provide support with assessing equity impacts, setting equity goals, and designing a process to co-develop comprehensive decarbonization policies. And so the content in this tool was developed for the Equitable Home Electrification Toolkit by the Rocky Mountain Institute alongside Emerald Cities Collaborative, and is intended for use by local governments and community groups tasked with developing a roadmap for electrifying their community's housing stock. So next slide, please. So the second recommendation that we have in the playbook is to really take the time to design equitable engagement strategies. And when designing equitable engagement strategies, it's important to always find ways to center marginalized and underrepresented groups in all engagement and ensure that their perspectives are reflected in the leadership and decision-making structures of the planning process. And so there are a lot of great examples of case studies that demonstrate equitable engagement strategies. One of the examples that we wanted to highlight here is the Minneapolis Green Zones, which folks may be familiar with. And the Minneapolis designated 2 green zones. And these were known as areas where residents have experienced disproportionate pollution impacts and systemic marginalization. And so each green zone has a task force, and it consists of individuals who live or work in the affected neighborhoods. And the task forces are responsible for implementing work plans that address issues like public health, climate resilience, and environmental justice. Another case study that we wanted to highlight here is the Seattle Equitable Development Initiative. The City of Seattle, the Equitable Development Initiative is an ongoing equity grant-making program investing in community envision and community-led solutions that address physical and cultural displacement pressures faced by communities of color and marginalized populations in Seattle. So EDI funds organizational capacity building, property acquisition, and capital project development for community-owned spaces to increase and really reach equitable outcomes. And a tool that we'd like to highlight that you see in the screen, the bottom of the screen here, is the Climate Equity and Community Engagement in Building Electrification Toolkit. This was developed by Emerald Cities Collaborative and an organization called Poder. This toolkit derived from the City of San Francisco's engagement with the Urban Sustainability Directors Network's Zero Cities project. And the purpose of this initiative was to experiment with different forms of community engagement to highlight best practices, lessons learned, and models for creating effective community engagement around equity and climate resilience through anchor community strategies. Next slide, please. So the next step that we highlight is to begin identifying program focus areas. So using community data and community priorities, establish clear racial equity, housing, workforce, health, and environmental justice goals. And these goals should be set for both engagement activities as well as program outcomes. So alongside these important program goals, we also recommend to make greenhouse gas emission reductions a metric for program success. And one of the case studies we highlight here is from the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power and its incentives for energy efficiency measures. So at the building level, LADWP provides incentives for energy efficiency measures if whole building energy savings are above 10%. So through the Comprehensive Affordable Multifamily Retrofits Program, LADWP offers incentives based on the size of the property, the location of efficiency upgrades, and the metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent reduced. So for multifamily buildings with fewer than 65 units, LADWP provides $5,400 per metric tons of carbon reduced in common areas, and $6,750 per metric tons of carbon reduced in renter units. Larger multifamily buildings can earn up to $6,200 and $7,750 per metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, respectively. And of course, a tool that we highlight here is just the numerous tools that EPA has that can help folks develop GHG emission inventories at the state and local level. Next slide, please. So after identifying program focus areas, we recommend moving on to establishing program upgrade offerings. And as a best practice, we recommend prioritizing comprehensive efficiency upgrades and electrification in program offerings. So one of the case studies that we highlight here is Massachusetts Low-Income Energy Affordability Network, otherwise known as LEAN. And in LEAN, the Deep Energy Retrofit Pathway provides incentives for buildings that meet a 40% energy use reduction compared to existing conditions. And these projects include higher than standard weatherization, and they can also include electrification of space and water heating. And in the playbook, we also link to a resource by ACEEE, which would be helpful. And this resource linked at the bottom of this slide details the results from a national analysis looking at gas versus electric decarbonization and deep retrofit options for space and water heating. And it also looks at their life cycle cost. So next slide, please. So design program offerings to prevent increased household costs and displacement. So obviously a program that displaces people from their homes is not a best practice. So this recommendation is really meant to emphasize the need for programs to be designed in ways that protect housing affordability rather than to charge forward and hope for the best. And so a few examples of what this might look like in practice. The Efficiency Navigator in Middleton and Madison, Wisconsin, a partnership run jointly by Sustain Dane and Elevate, requires owners of unsubsidized housing to sign a contract stipulating that the units using the program are occupied by households at or below 80% of the area median income, and requires the owners to use reasonable efforts to maintain the unit as housing for low and moderate income households for a period of 3 years after the completion of upgrade work. And another case study that we wanted to highlight is in Seattle. And Seattle's multifamily weatherization program provides project management services at no cost. But to be eligible, building owners must commit to keeping the rents affordable for at least 3 years, and that at least half of the tenants must meet income qualifications. And just a few examples of how that's been done. And we also link to a report by ACEEE at the bottom here that describes the benefits, barriers, and strategies for decarbonizing buildings in the affordable housing sector. It also identifies and describes selected decarbonization and deep retrofit programs serving affordable housing markets. So we hope that you find that useful. And so another best practice we highlight in the playbook here is to create an easy-to-use program intake, participation, and support process, for example, through a one-stop shop. And a one-stop shop model is an approach that provides centralized outreach and communication, educational resources for both renters and owners. And it also includes technical assistance and customer support, project management, and access to incentives and financing through a single entity. And so we recommend structuring the program in a way that participants have a single dedicated point of contact to guide them through what could be a really difficult process. And so it's also important to note here that the person that is designated as the point of contact, it's important for them to be sufficiently trained and for them to have cultural competency. And so another case study that we highlight here, going back again to the Massachusetts LEAN program, this is a really notable integrated and well-coordinated one-stop shop program to serve owners and operators of low-income and affordable housing. And the LEAN network includes a lot of different players. It includes community action agencies, utilities, state agencies, as well as nonprofits. And the program requires for-profit affordable housing owners to abide by an affordability period based on the level of incentives received. LEAN has served more than 220,000 residential units and has delivered more than 100 million dollars in energy savings since its inception. And for additional materials that specifically cover outreach and engagement for multifamily buildings, we list a resource here. Folks can take a look at ACEEE's Multifamily Energy Savings Project, which has numerous resources that specifically cover low-income and affordable multifamily programs. And just another tool that we provide here at the bottom. So we link to a guide by an organization called Innovate that provides a step-by-step process for how to set up a one-stop shop. And just a note here that the organization is based in the UK, but we found that the information in the resource is still definitely applicable for program admins in the United States. So with that, I'm gonna go to the next screen here and hand it over to my colleague, Jasmine Ma.
Sorry about that. I was muted. Thank you, Dee. Hello, everyone. My name is Jasmine Ma. I am a senior research analyst at ACEEE, and I'm here to discuss the final 6 strategies that were listed in the retrofit playbook. Next slide, please. So the next strategy is designing your program in coordination with partners. This builds on the earlier recommendation to establish multiple program offerings, as forming partnerships with external organizations can help you expand the reach of your program in addition to the kinds of services that you can offer. We particularly recommend partnering with community-based organizations, or CBOs, as CBOs can directly connect you to community members who can help shape your program to reflect community needs. Some other possible program partners can be utilities, nonprofits, and state or local government agencies. In Minneapolis, the 4D program is a collaboration between the city's economic development and sustainability agencies, and it's jointly administered by the health and housing departments. This program offers building owners financial incentives if they agree to keep a certain percentage of their units at an affordable rental price, and building owners can use these financial incentives to improve the energy efficiency of their buildings and also to install solar. We also provide 2 resources from DOE that you could peruse. There's the DOE's Better Buildings Residential Network website that contains strategies about maintaining strong strategic partnerships with local companies and organizations. It's part of a Healthy Homes incentive program to complete 100 home energy upgrade projects. And then there is a partnership toolkit that contains additional case studies. Next slide, please. Next strategy is prioritizing the most energy insecure and disadvantaged households to receive upgrades. A lot of previous research has shown that residential energy efficiency programs primarily reach white, higher income homeowners. And as a result, communities that fall outside this demographic, usually communities of color, low income residents, and renters tend to get left behind by business as usual programs. This is why it's especially important to target LMI households, especially those who live in affordable housing, to make sure that they don't get left behind and that they can also receive the benefits of energy efficiency. This map here shows the state of Vermont organized by census tract, and then also classified by total energy burden and total energy spending. You may remember Ian discussing energy burdens earlier in the presentation. As a reminder, a high energy burden is what happens when a household spends 6% or more of their annual household income on energy bills, and a severe energy burden is when they spend 10% or more on energy bills. So Efficiency Vermont runs a targeted high use program to target low and moderate income households that use about 5,000 kilowatts per year or more of electricity and have an energy burden greater than 6%. So a household that meets all these criteria can receive direct install of efficiency measures and also electrification measures, such as appliances, heat pumps, and heat pump water heaters. you can also review the report towards more equitable energy efficiency programs for underserved households. This report talks more about why certain customer groups have been consistently underserved by energy efficiency programs, discusses why there are still a lot of persistent barriers, and also recommends strategies for moving forward. Next slide, please. Next strategy is building accountability into the program. It is incredibly important to build trust with the communities you intend to serve, especially if you're reaching out to communities that have previously had their trust broken by external organizations. You can explore community benefits agreements or workforce benefits agreements. Community benefits agreements clearly outline the benefits that community members receive from a project, while workforce benefit agreements typically describe practices that can improve the economic development in a local community, whether it be a pledge to hire local workers or to source from minority-owned businesses. In Somerville, Massachusetts, the Union Square neighborhood has a community benefits agreement that pledges to prioritize local hiring for construction jobs, to improve the economy, and also creates a technical education and local career program at the local high school. There are also relocation benefits to existing businesses, opportunities for new spaces and redevelopment, and a robust funding commitment to affordable housing to highlight a broader commitment to economic inclusion and sustainable growth in the neighborhood. DOE has a CBA, or Community Benefits Agreement Toolkit, which includes a comprehensive guide, FAQs, and presentation slides to educate stakeholders on the value of community benefits agreements and the process for creating them. And reviewing this resource can also give you some ideas about the kind of language that you would like to use, you may want to use as you develop a community benefits agreement. Next slide, please. All right, next strategy is ensuring that the program provides health and safety measures. A lot of the households that could benefit most from energy efficiency upgrades or weatherization often can't receive upgrades because the home is filled with health and safety hazards such as mold or asbestos or broken roofs or faulty wiring that need to be addressed before weatherization can occur. Unfortunately, a lot of utilities lack the funds and the capacity to address these issues, so the home gets deferred from service, the residents still live with the health hazards, and they can't receive the benefits of a weatherized home. So what some utilities and organizations are doing are creating pre-weatherization or weatherization readiness programs that specifically address these health hazards, specifically repair the home to make it fit for weatherization. And a case study that we present is the St. John's Housing Partnership in Florida. It offers repair services for single-family homeowners. And today we have Bill Lazar from St. John's Partnership on the call, and he can speak more about the program a little later. We also recommend a manual from CDC that it discusses different aspects of a healthy home, areas where there may be in-home health hazards, and also recommends strategies for remedying such hazards. Next slide, please. Next strategy is ensuring that the program streamlines how users access funding. It is very beneficial for a program to offer generous financial incentives that cover all or most of the upfront costs for customers, especially those with limited incomes. We often talk about the practice of braiding or combining multiple funding sources to ensure that your program has enough funds for upgrades, and funds can be braided from private sector sources or federal or state or local government sources. We also recommend covering the full cost of replacing appliances, as this can also become expensive for consumers, but it's also a helpful way to improve energy efficiency and for the residents. A case study that we highlight is Built to Last in Philadelphia. It's run by the Philadelphia Energy Authority, and partners with the Philadelphia Green Capital Corps to help identify and close funding gaps through layering and streamlining existing funding sources and services. We have Emily Lucas on the call today from Philadelphia Energy Authority, and I believe her colleague Alon Abramson may be joining too to discuss more about the program. And then another case study that we highlight is the Healthy and Green Retrofit Pilot Program in Boston for appliance retrofits. And this appliance replacement, this program involves building owners. They can receive up to about $50,000 per unit to to access energy efficiency financial incentives, construction management services, and construction oversight throughout the process. And Kristen Simmons from the Boston's Mayor's Office of Housing is on the call today and can speak more about the program. A tool that we highlight is a case study on Built to Last, created by the organization C40 Cities. And there is another tool that contains guidelines for creating community-driven retrofit programs. Next slide, please. And the final strategy that we recommend in our playbook is ensuring that the program helps build out a local green workforce. I specifically want to emphasize the importance of a local green workforce, as hiring directly from the communities that you intend to serve is a great way to establish accountability in your program and to build trust with community members. I also want to highlight the fact that the communities that tend to be underserved by energy efficiency programs also tend to be underrepresented in the clean energy sector. So another way to make a program more equitable is to improve the diversity of the clean energy workforce, and also tracking the creation of jobs and tracking the impacts of workforce development training programs can further improve accountability improve the accountability of your program. A case study that we highlight is Red Cloud Renewables. It is an Oglala Lakota-led organization on the Pine Ridge Reservation that provides free place-based workforce development opportunities for Native Americans. It is a pre-apprenticeship readiness program that includes training on how to conduct building retrofits and energy assessments, with a focus on health and safety, as mentioned in a previous strategy. Since 2002, the program has successfully trained more than 70 tribes and created more than 600 jobs in weatherization, solar installation, and sustainable home building. And another tool, or another example to explore, is the American Council on Renewable Energy, or ACOR's Accelerate Membership Program. And this is a cohort-based program that supports women and minority-led renewable energy companies by connecting them to resources, which include complimentary access to events, exclusive briefings, tools, and advocacy. And with that, I will transition things over to my colleague Stephanie for Q&A. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you so much, Jasmine. And thank you all who have spoken. Ian and Dee, really appreciate all of your input. So now we are transitioning into the Q&A portion of the workshop, where you will have the opportunity to ask questions about the R2E2 playbook, the 12 actions that were discussed, the best practices that were mentioned, and also have the chance to hear from the practitioners highlighted during the presentation. Next slide. So before we actually go into the Q&A, I want to introduce all of the practitioners. First, I want to thank them for joining this workshop and being so open to sharing their amazing programs with you all. And for workshop participants, please think about which practitioners you'd like to hear from and speak to, and ask questions during the breakout session portion of this workshop. So first we have Bill Lazar, who is the Executive Director of St. John's Partnership in Florida and a licensed residential contractor. He's worked with affordable housing programs for 36 years, and St. John's Partnership provides housing services, including home repairs and new construction for renters and first-time home buyers. Next, we have Kristen Simmons, who leads the residential decarbonization efforts at the City of Boston's Mayor's Office of Housing. Kristen develops and implements energy retrofit programs for both deed-restricted and naturally occurring affordable housing in Boston, which will require deep energy retrofits and decarbonization for nearly 80% of Boston's buildings. And I'm also introducing Jenna Franklin, who is the Equitable Development Initiative Division Director for the City of Seattle's Office of Planning and Community Development. She has nearly 25 years of experience in strategic planning, community visioning, and improving public agency programs, services, practices through inclusive community engagement and co-creation efforts. And moving on to Alon Abramson, who may or may have not joined the workshop today. If he has, he will appear, but he is the Vice President of Residential Programs for Philadelphia Energy Authority, where he runs the Built to Last program, which was mentioned. All of Alon's programmatic work has a central focus on equitable access to stable, affordable housing and leveraging clean energy to provide long-term utility affordability. We also have Emily Lucas, who is the Director of Residential Programs at the Philadelphia Energy Authority, where she oversees programs that connect Philadelphia residents with home repair and solar services. And lastly, we welcome Abigail Corso. I'm not quite sure if Abby has joined yet, but she is the Chief Strategy Officer at Elevate, located in Madison, Wisconsin. She oversees Elevate's strategy in developing and implementing new programs related to efficiency, solar energy financing, and electrification focused on affordable housing. So please add your questions in the chat, and I will be going through them and assigning questions to presenters and also experts. So the first question that we have here is for Taylor. How is Energy Star and R2E2 collaborating, sharing program design with the states? Seems states are working to determine program design as they begin to implement programming with IRA funds.
Sure. Our strategy is very much complementary to support the Inflation Reduction Act opportunities, largely the rebates that are tied to Energy Star products. So I mentioned early on, we have a new partnership for Energy Star home upgrade service providers. We also have a new partnership with state energy offices. So we are regularly coordinating with the state energy offices to help them in setting up their programs and giving them support, tying into these best practices that R2E2 is creating and sharing through our resource center. All of those great program examples. So we are in regular coordination with the state energy offices, trying to help support them. I know they have a lot on their plate right now at struggling to stand up these programs. And so we are fully supporting them in the Inflation Reduction Act rebate rollout programs.
Thanks.
Alongside our federal siblings at DOE.
Thanks, Taylor. So the next question is for Jasmine and Bill. And this is from Annie Porteroff. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I appreciate step 10 on ensuring programs should provide health and safety measures. If we are a smaller city that doesn't have the funding or staff to remediate things like asbestos Are there examples of communities that have used other parties, like perhaps WAP, to address those health and safety issues? And WAP stands for the Weatherization Assistance Program.
You want me to take a stab at that one?
Sure, and I could fill in if there's anything else I have to add.
The housing partnership is a private nonprofit, so we're always hunting different pots of money, trying to talk to whatever local government or federal program so we can find. And to your point, the biggest challenge is all of these, our biggest target is existing homes that need improvements. And everybody looks at the latest, greatest idea of making more energy efficient. Here in Florida, it's making them more resilient against disasters like hurricanes. And for those of us who are trying to help seniors, it's making them more accessible for independent living. And ultimately, each of those programs stands alone and goes, but who's going to deal with the health and safety issues? Energy Star helps a little bit with its assessment that when you put in a properly sized and sealed air conditioning system, you improve the indoor air quality, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there's money to do all of these. The Housing Partnership has a weatherization program. We've been part of that for 35 years. And that helps to a small degree, but that's only about $7,000 or $8,000 a house. So it really becomes challenging. And that's what we spend a lot of time is constantly trying to leverage funds. And as with most housing programs, funding goes up and down from year to year, but that's exactly what you've got to do is look around, and sometimes you can't help everybody, but you can find a pot of money that's focused on seniors and you can leverage your money with their money to at least have an impact on those. I think the biggest challenge in putting together housing programs that address any and all of these is that most housing programs they work in silos. They have their own priority list. With weatherization, it's high energy users. With elderly programs, it's seniors. It's everybody's got their own little list, and sometimes you have to be first on the waiting list, prioritize, and trying to get folks to work across those lines and spend all their money at the same time on a house is the smartest thing to do in terms of construction. But it's one of the hardest things to do when it comes to leveraging resources.
I echo a lot of what Bill said. To the person who asked the question, I can definitely understand that you may be struggling a lot as a local community to find adequate funding sources. I personally know more about, say, state and federal funding level health sources, health funds. So you may have to be creative and look at the state level or the federal level if you want to secure a pot of money to address health and safety issues. I particularly know a lot about health service initiatives through the Children's Health Insurance Program. This is a way to basically unlock unused Medicaid funds to carry out some non-traditional health measures, which could include addressing in-home health hazards. So that is just one example of a bit of an out-of-the-box funding source that you may want to explore if you're trying to fund health upgrades for your community.
Thanks, Jasmine. Would anyone else like to add? Okay, so I have a question for all of the practitioners. How do you approach integrating or unifying existing home repair programs in your service area, especially when they are run by multiple service providers?
That's one of the hardest things, because at a certain point, you end up running into a turf problem. Everybody's got their own program. They have their own funding for doing the eligibility verification, and trying to sometimes figure out how to assist the same house at the same time means you've got to have a huge level of cooperation, or you have to just start at some point. Because as an example, when I started working in Duval County, 30 years ago. It's in Jacksonville, Florida. We built up a rehab list, waiting list of over 5,000 homes. And it was on a first come, first ready basis. So at any point you try and prioritize something new, it's like, I've got 5,000 people on a waiting list. You've got to bend the rules. And ultimately the thing that makes it work all the time is having a creative person who's running those programs who says, I want to figure out how to do it. And everybody's got to give a little bit. The weatherization program cannot just help the highest energy consumers. We're all dealing with low income households. So at a certain point, we've got to say, okay, so how do I leverage your money? So can we work on a project with you and you work on a project with us? And we at least show that putting the money together has a bigger impact. But it's always been frustrating to me that at the end of the day, we get accolades for doing very creative work in terms of leveraging pots of money. But at the same time, the housing programs don't change. They're still stuck in that. We've got this process, we go down this road, and these are the people that have to do that particular type of inspection. You know, I've seen over and over again, most building inspectors or home inspectors don't know enough about energy conservation to make really good recommendations on improving building performance. Most of them don't use a blower door. So these are all things that it's all a work in progress. And it happens if you can get people together in your community and figure out how to do it. Even if it's on a trial basis, it at least makes sense on the homes that you're able to work on.
Do any other practitioners want to answer the question? And I'm happy to read it again. How do you approach integrating, unifying existing home repair programs in your service area, especially when they are run by multiple service providers?
I could probably speak to a parallel example. The city of Seattle some years ago instituted a program called RainWise, a green stormwater infrastructure program. And they recognized that there were a number of service providers across the city. They actually created a program to onboard and integrate those service providers and qualify them so that they could have some degree of understanding and control over where they were working, what services they were qualified to perform. And so that would allow homeowners to access service providers that they knew they could receive the rebate, they could receive the support to actually install the various toolkit items at their home. So thinking a little bit about how you can work with the service provider community and create a program that actually qualifies them at the jurisdictional level can be an effective way to also make sure that you're distributing the opportunities.
Thanks, Jenna. Do any other practitioners want to add in before I go to the next question?
I'll just also offer that I think Bill's point about how siloed programs can be is certainly a pain point that we feel in Philadelphia as well. I'm sure that's a really common pain point. We have had success working with more nimble nonprofit repair agencies like Habitat for Humanity and Rebuilding Together. And sometimes that that partnership where they can be a little bit more flexible and take a little bit more of a home repair approach can be can help provide that gap resource between these different programs that are very prescriptive and kind of rigid in what they're able to deliver and what they're able to pay for.
Thanks, Emily. So now going on to another question, how do you keep low-income customers engaged throughout the process from energy audit to weatherization? And this is a question for all practitioners. Happy to repeat the question.
I
I
don't
can,
think that's your answer.
I could jump in and maybe provide some examples from the Equitable Development Initiative work, because we're pairing with folks are applying to our program to do capital projects with all sorts of varying levels of understanding, some of whom are individual community organizations. We have about 30% of our portfolio touches residential, housing, multifamily housing. And they're first-time developers in many cases, and so the learning curve can be steep. And they have varying degrees of interest in actually, learning how to be a developer across all the phases of a project. So for our program, it's basically doing quite a high degree of project management. We pair every organization that is in our program with a project manager who meets with them regularly and provides coaching and support at every phase, really emphasizing the value of some of the due diligence activities and learning. And so I think for us, that has been much more successful than, sort of providing self-directed learning opportunities, because it really meets people where they are. So we kind of, I think, blend almost a social work case management approach with a grants management program, helping folks move through various complicated phases of their development projects.
One thing I'll add to that, because I was thinking more about how you keep the low-income recipients involved, but when you talk about these various disciplines, whether it's energy efficiency or resiliency or accessibility, one of the real challenges is most of our home inspectors or people who are creating the scope of work aren't necessarily multidisciplinary themselves. And so what I run into all the time is we've got someone who runs a housing program who says, gee, we'd like to do this. And they want to hire an energy rater for that, but then they want to go, well, we'd really like accessibility brought into it also. Well, then you need someone who's got some occupational therapy insights. And then when you start talking about resiliency and hurricanes, someone else has got, oh, well, I've got a green building certification. And nobody wants to pay for 3 or 4 different certifications to help you have a comprehensive scope of work. So we usually end up having the contractor, the program support, the person who runs the program, whatever it is, and the person who is representing that low-income household. The 3 of them sit down together and say, okay, well, we're not going to pay for 3 different certifications, so maybe I can do 2 or 3 of them as part of my responsibility. And you get sort of a lukewarm approach to it. And so a lot of it comes back to training, and weatherization is a great example. The Department of Energy provides funding for all sorts of energy conservation training that we need, but it's not cheap. I mean, we're talking about certifications that are $3,000 and $4,000 at a time, and you're not going to find private contractors who are going to do that. So that's, as we try and help people do more of this, we've got to learn more. We've got to get whoever is running that housing program or that rehab effort, or new construction for that matter. You're not going to find it just by reading the building code. We've got to continue to educate the people who are involved to think beyond just their particular area of expertise.
Thanks, Bill. Would anyone else like to add about keeping low-income customers engaged throughout the process from energy audit to weatherization?
I'll jump in with the example from Built to Last. With our program, when folks apply, they're assigned an agency and a project manager that is their kind of their guide through the whole program. They manage that project from start to finish, even if the participating agencies, even if they aren't providing that service or scoping those agencies' work. They are that point of contact with the client who's saying, okay, we're getting you in touch with accessibility upgrades. This is what this is going to look like for you. This is who to expect. This is why it's important. And that way the homeowner has that continuity through their project. they have somebody that they know and can ask questions to. And it helps, it just helps keep them engaged to the question, and helps them, helps with some education around that too, why they should participate, why they should participate in that program. So we found that to be pretty successful. It is a challenge, but having that one point of contact is really, I think, a good key to success.
Thank you, Emily. Any other comments on engagement? Okay. So I have a question for Kristen. Almost a year ago, you launched your health and green retrofit pilot program, which focuses on 2 to 4 unit owner occupied homes, providing appliances, HVAC, weatherization, and even solar, all up to a cost of $50,000. What has surprised you about the rollout so far, and what have you learned? Kristen, it seems like you're on mute. Yeah, we can skip that question for now until you get resolved. Okay, so
Oh, wait, I'm here.
You got it.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yay. It's like technical challenges over here. So I'm on my iPhone. So we're providing up to $50,000 per unit. So depending on the project, we might be spending $100,000 to $200,000. And we're providing turnkey services, deep technical assistance, et cetera. What has surprised us? So this is a true pilot. So the goal was to learn what we need to learn so that we can decarbonize this building segment and decarbonize Boston. We've learned a lot. The big surprises, I think, are that the interest is much greater than we thought it would be. And many of our applicants specifically mentioned the health benefits of decarbonization and energy efficiency. They also mentioned climate change, and of course we heard about reducing utility cost. Many also expressed an interest in making their rental units safer and more comfortable for their tenants, which was actually really incredibly exciting to us. We really had no idea what to expect when we launched this offer. We have now completed some of the assessments. So part of our program is we do decarbonization assessments within buildings. And then from that, we work with our vendor to develop a decarbonization roadmap. And the first step of the roadmap is the work that we're doing with the homeowner and the tenant, and that we call it the year 1 scope of work. But the roadmap continues to year 10, which is when the building should be fully decarbonized. What we've found, and this is probably not shocking to anyone working in low and moderate income housing, is that the building stock is in deep need and distressed. It's really hard to think about decarbonization and installing heat pumps when there's a big hole in the roof.
Yeah.
And my challenge right now, this week is, what do we do with all the wet basements? What do we do? Do we invest money in a French drain and then insulate walls? I don't have an answer yet. We're working on it. My background is an architect, and we've got a really great team, so we'll solve those little micro issues, but it really matters. The other thing that really, I think, really shocked us is, again, being in this world for a long time, I'm familiar with the challenges for low income, BIPOC, renter populations, and the utility burden. But we get utility bills, so we can see what that utility burden is, and we're stunned. We're stunned by the amount of arrearages we're seeing. We're stunned by what people are paying monthly. And we're equally stunned by what homeowners are paying for home insurance in Boston. We know that insurance companies are paying close attention to storms and increasing rates. I did not know that that was happening in Boston, but we have seen homeowners who desperately need new roofs and new siding so that they can be insurable again. So hopefully we're solving that. And I'll say one last thing. This is it's a surprise, maybe it's not a surprise, but our pilot is actually positioned as a decarbonization pilot. We knew we would be addressing barriers to decarbonization. I think one of our first lessons learned right now is that we're going to be repositioning. When we think about scaling, we're thinking of repositioning as a repair program, which Boston has long done, but influenced and layered. Decarbonization will be layered into repair programs, and we're in the process of figuring out how to launch that, how to reposition what we currently do in the Boston Home Center so that they do the repair work that is so needed while under the lens of decarbonization and energy efficiency. So there you go.
Thanks,
Yep.
Kristen.
Thanks.
There was a follow-up question in the chat for you. So it would be great if you can answer that in the chat. But the question is, can you share how your pilot program is being funded in Boston?
Sure. We are funded by the American Rescue Plan Act. We're excited that the pilot has $5 million. We will be working with 30 buildings in the pilot, and we just received $750,000 from our operational funds to make upgrades to our existing repair programs that Boston has been running for 20 to 30 years.
Thank you. So my next question is for Jenna. Your initiative was built with community from the ground up. What concerns or pushback, if any, did you receive from within city government to taking this approach, and how were you able to overcome these?
Yes, so the Equitable Development Initiative, or EDI, was built in partnership with a Race, Equity, and Social Justice Task Force and a group of 21 community organizations from the most marginalized community districts across the city. And initially, the city was reluctant on how to approach this because they didn't understand what the cost implications would be. The mechanics of the program, the setup, all the things we're talking about here were concerns. And then, of course, in any city government, where are the positions and people who will do this work, right? So a lot of the questions came up early just around what is the sustainability from a financial perspective, but also how would we staff such a thing, and what would the metrics both for funding, what would the criteria metrics around funding look like, as well as performance and success. One of the key things that I think was a turning point was working together with the community groups to create an advisory board, to create an implementation plan and tie that to a business case built on data, both qualitative and quantitative data, to really also capture the human component. And then to focus in on what asset-based, community development fundamentally is about, which is at the core of equitable, inclusive civic participation. And it's about a release of power and control and trust in the community, having answers and solutions to their own needs and problems, and just really lacking a resource to implement those. It required a fairly lengthy process to develop the implementation plan for EDI and get the council and the mayor's office buy-in. And then it was timing. Everyone's talked about funding. We waited for the sale of a large city property and appealed to the city to earmark those funds for an initial cycle of funding. And then built on that as other properties were sold, and then as we had some progressive tax changes that created a payroll tax as well as the short-term rental tax, and had some success garnering those funds. So we've grown now from what was originally about a $5 million funding pool to a $25 million funding pool. And it's always subject to review. We have budget issues and other things that may impact what we are able to fund. But I think taking it in an iterative fashion, working with our elected officials across the city, all of those things are really critical to supporting the initiative really taking root and having a more long-term, having the city see it as a more long-term versus a one-time solution.
Thank you, Jenna. So now I have a question for all practitioners. Even when financial incentives are available, are there any criteria to evaluate competent contractors to reliably carry out the upgrade work and provide recommendations that are in keeping with current decarbonization approaches?
It's called training. There's two parts to this. One is America is facing a labor shortage. And if we want contractors, and this is very different if you're talking about renovating or building single family homes or multi-story buildings in terms of what your workforce potential is. But we lost 30 or 40% of our small builders during the last recession. And some of them, because they were people like me who are in their late 60s, and some of them are folks that just gave up. But we've ignored our vocational programs for 40 years. So we're now trying to rebuild a labor force. What would really help is workforce housing programs that would subsidize the wages of the people going into the apprenticeship program, pay them a living wage so they could afford to live in the communities where they're working, and make it easier for the small contractors. The big contractors, and I'm here in Florida, I can tell you now, the big home builders are not the solution to affordable housing. If you're traded on the stock market, that's where your essentially your scope of work is going to eventually end up being. And when we talk about all these things that I think are extremely important to anybody's quality of life in their home, it's got to be training for the contractors. And you've got to think about, how is that contractor who's already overworked, has got more people calling, asking him or her to get started, and they're trying to hire enough people, they're not going to take on small jobs when they can take on a larger job, just simply because they got to feed their own families while doing it. So in construction, it's volume that works. You know, we saw it back during the ARA days when President Obama put a ton of money into weatherization. We required contractors to go through training, but we also guaranteed them 15 or 20 jobs a month that they knew they could count on. So they did it. If you're offering them a job or two a month, they're probably not going to take it up unless they've got a good heart or doing it for some particular community-based reason. It's really a struggle getting folks into these programs.
Thanks, Bill. Any other comments from practitioners?
I just want to quickly add that adding wraparound services is a really beneficial way to improve your workforce development programs, especially if you want to reach traditionally underserved groups. For example, transportation assistance is an often overlooked service, but it's also a common unmet need among a lot of underserved individuals who are looking to get into the clean energy workforce. So I know of one program in Minnesota that offers it offers weekly transportation stipends for public transit, or even subsidized Uber rides to help workers get to and from training sites. And I think the program may also offer some training for a driver's license for people who currently don't have one. So that's another thing to consider as you improve workforce.
Thanks, Jasmine. Any other comments before we move on to the next question? Okay, so my next question is for Emily. Your program focuses on retrofits to single-family homes and leverages multiple funding sources via a one-stop shop approach. which funding streams are you proudest to be able to offer to participants? And what is the key to successfully working with those funding streams?
Okay, yeah. So that's a hard one to answer as far as which one are we most proud of, because we are proud of the collaboration of all of it together. That's where the magic is. But I will say a really essential piece of what makes this all successful kind of has been echoed by everybody here on this call, is having some flexible funding that can kind of be bridging the gap between different programs that we're trying to have work together on the same house at the same time. So, you know, for example, if you have WAP and you have if you have WAP or you have a accessibility program, but you have the basement stairs are falling down and neither program can cover that work and neither program can deliver their full services unless that work is done, then it's really nice to have that some flexible funding where you can pay for that work to occur. So that is really a big area that we try to focus on fundraising for ourselves, and harnessing. I would be remiss if I did not mention, like, we do have a huge benefit in Pennsylvania. We have whole home repair funding through the state, which came through in 2022 that PEA is a sub-recipient of. So that has been a big game changer for us to have that funding in place to provide that foundational foundational repair. Well, it's flexible, so we can use it on whatever we want, but it really does help us do that work to do home repair, critical home repair, all of that, like pre-weatherization, enabling upgrades, work to help all of our partners be able to deliver the most full version of their services possible. So I would say that that's something that we are proud of and something that we fight really hard to continue to have a funding stream for the success of our program and for all of the participating agencies. They are also really, really glad that we are here with that funding so that they can, again, be delivering the fullest of their services. You had that was a 2 or 3 part question, so I want to make sure that I'm answering all of it. Stephanie?
Yeah, I think which funding streams are you proudest to be able to offer to participants, and what is the key to successfully working with those funding streams?
Sure. Yeah, and I will also just mention that we do collaborate heavily with our local WAP program. And then there's other, there are HUD funded programs for like older adult home accessibility that we're using. So I don't want to forget to shout them out. I think the key to success on that, I think one thing that we are doing well is trying to make sure that our one front door that we have for home applications covers eligibility up front, so that whenever we are in a home and we are kind of trying to figure out what blend of services we're trying to connect people with, we already know that they are eligible for those services. So I would say that that's a key part, is that we are doing the work up front to make sure that all of the different funding streams, all of the different agencies we're working with are getting, that we have the information we need for that client to participate in all of those different programs successfully.
Thanks, Emily. And now I have a question for all of the practitioners. How does your program deal with emergency equipment replacements? If a gas furnace or water heater breaks and a heat pump replacement cannot be sourced and installed immediately, is there a good way of to provide temporary heating for a few days until a heat pump can be sourced? Or are there any programs out there that do this well?
It all depends. You've got to create a funding source for that, because most housing programs aren't doing short-term repairs. Even in disaster areas, after you get hit by a hurricane, there's not money to put a temporary kitchen sink in so you can live in your house and still work while everything's going on. The only thing we do is look for small pots of money, like from United Way. Or Florida has a very unique housing funding stream that's based on the dock stamp sales on real estate. And so within that, just like Emily was saying, it can be a very creative source if you set it up to be creative. And so they might in different municipalities have an emergency repair program. But ultimately, the question's still going to say, I've got to verify your household income. I got to verify you're the recipient, you're the owner, and we're going to do it. So sometimes if you've got to go through all of that, you're almost not going to be able to use a government program. You're going to have some pot of discretionary funding. Either you raise it in the community from donations, or United Way, or a foundation that just says, you know, they need help, go help them.
Thanks, Bill. Would anyone else like to answer the question?
Yeah, this is Abby from Elevate. I would agree with Bill. The program, our Efficiency Navigator program doesn't, we are not the first call for emergency repairs. When our owners that have come through the program do call us, we either they either need a home repair program, which can handle emergencies, or many of the contractors in our program are great, and they will address emergencies. Funding is actually the issue. If we can find funding for them, we will, but we don't have that much discretionary funding at this point in time. But I agree with Bill, to build that pool of discretionary funding would be really important.
Thanks, Abby.
I don't have a solution, but I would say this question does highlight the tension between kind of the thoughtful, long range, intentional work that we're trying to do here, and how hard that is to get that to fit into and address whenever we do have these short-term emergency things that pop up. And I think that question does highlight that difficulty.
Thanks, Emily. It seems like Kristen wants to answer the question, but she can't unmute herself. So Kristen, if you can answer in the chat, that would be great.
I think I'm here now.
Oh, great.
Sorry, my Wi-Fi has been in the laptop. So the Boston Home Center does do emergency repairs of heating systems right now. And right now we are replacing like with like in those emergency replacements, specifically for seniors, income eligible seniors. We are looking at this question closely is part of our mission of how do we decarbonize our standard operating practice. I think it will be a few years perhaps before we are in a position to say the emergency replacement is a heat pump, at least for heating systems. But we're hoping that within 1 or 2 years, as supply chains availability, homes get in better position, because it's not just like replacing, like for like heating systems. You've usually got to upgrade electrical systems. You've got to do all this other stuff. So it's a complicated thing. And I think right now our practice is actually going forward is we replace that natural gas heating system, and 6 months later we come back and we do heat pumps. We start thinking about how do we do this transition with the existing heating system in place. So it's, I think it's a process that we're all really trying to figure out. It's not an easy answer for sure.
Thanks, Kristen. So my next question is for Abby. The Energy Navigator program requires that multifamily rental property owners use reasonable efforts to maintain the unit as housing for low and moderate income households for a period of time. How did you decide on the length of time, and have you found this to be a deterrent to program participation?
Great question. So our program is for naturally occurring affordable housing, and this is housing that is not eligible for the weatherization program. So it's typically in Wisconsin, it's between 60 and maybe 100% area median income. Anything below 60 or below is actually eligible for WAP, and we work closely with the WAP agency. With every upgrade, the way the program's structured is the owners have access to a grant of about $25,000 for the upgrades. In one community, it's actually much higher because they're doing a heat pump demonstration project. And the grant actually is used to pay the contractors. So the owners actually never receive the money directly. And with that, so the grant, and then they get free technical assistance from Elevate and our community partner, Sustain Dane. And that basically takes them through the whole program and manages the contractors. So we have a 5-year community benefits agreement that owners will not raise rents above the HUD fair market value that is set for Dane County, the community we work in. And we settled on 5 years because these properties are in private ownership. And we found with owners when we were doing the program design that if it was more than that time, they would maybe not do the building upgrades. And we felt if it was less, it wouldn't really have enough like preservation capacity. So that's where we ended at 5 years. We wish it could be longer, and we wish it had more teeth to it, but it is not a covenant or a deed restriction. We do work in another program in Oregon, which is administered by the Housing Finance Agency, and they have a 10-year commitment. There's a bit more strings attached to that program, so it's hard to attract the smaller buildings into it, but we are running a pilot with them, and we are testing the 10-year agreement within that pilot to see if the naturally occurring affordable housing owners would walk away from the program with that length of rental commitment.
Thanks, Abby. So my next question is for Jenna and anyone else who would like to answer this question. How can we make these programs more well-known and accessible? In my experience, homeowners often need to be strong self-advocates to find and apply for these programs. What strategies can be employed to reach those who might not be aware of these opportunities? And Jenna, I'm wondering if you could speak to how investing in long-term community engagement can benefit programs and is different from typical marketing efforts.
Yes, absolutely. So a couple of things, and I actually am going to pick up off the last question and move forward. We also have a valuation model. We do $1 per square foot times the number of months. So if you have 1,000 square feet, it's $1,000 per month and 12,000 a year. We would amortize that down against the total amount lent or borrowed to determine a repayment period. And we do have a deed and covenant agreement that goes through the end of that amortization period, which I think is, and we also have a program minimum of $150,000 for the multifamily units development projects. So anyhow, that's just another way in which we try to make it right size, because we award different amounts of grants based on the work that needs to be done. And then with regard to the question, how do we make the programs more well-known and accessible?
Mm-hmm.
We do a considerable amount of engagement in community, both at the community organization level, but also with our board, our Equitable Development Advisory Board. It was an interim board that became permanent, and it has an ordinance, the city ordinance attached to it to provide it with some authority. And through that board, we reach out into the community organizations. We do more than just issue funding opportunities, notices, but we actually do quite a bit of engagement throughout the year. So we're always trying to understand what are the community's needs and priorities and how would that impact the setting of annual criteria. We're also looking at, always what's the lowest barrier method for people to participate. And so we tend to do a low barrier application process where people can articulate the end vision for their development project, all of the things they would anticipate including. What we've noticed is for things that are, in the category of quote unquote optional, many of the organizations won't ask for it in their initial application. So, but then when we talk about what the values they have are, they do want to have energy efficient, healthy spaces for people to live, work, etc. But they're looking at minimizing their ask to appear more competitive. And so we're doing, rounds of interviewing as well to make sure that we are understanding really what they want to achieve and whether or not they minimized their ask in their application process and allowing for an adjustment.
Great.
So that's another way that we're trying to increase not just the accessibility of the process, but actually how we can allocate the right amount of funds to the project and really have it serve a broader community need. And to reach out to folks who may not be aware. Another thing we're doing is partnering with many of our other city departments. Collectively, we're stronger than we are individually. And so when we talk about working with our Office of Economic Development and our business improvement areas, our Office of Housing to make sure that our projects compare with larger housing projects. But we're also working with our Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs, our Department of Neighborhoods. So we're really trying to make sure that the array of program, the available sort of paths to enter the program and things you can achieve within the program are being communicated by multiple sources. And then we also have workforce development partners. Our investments are sizable and we know that they create jobs. And so we're trying to work with folks in Seattle like the Tabor 100 who cultivate a community or a wealth of technical service providers, professional service providers, contractors, all sorts of things to make sure that our project participants are getting the sort of team around them that they need to deliver their project.
Thanks, Jenna. Does anyone want to add about how we can make these programs more well-known and accessible?
There's a certain point with my experience, they're all so oversubscribed, we don't have to market them. We need to find more money to help.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I would add one more thing is that the best folks to share are the folks who've been through the program. And one of the things we do is provide capacity building money to our large grantee organizations, but at an individual, homeowner level, we're still looking at how can we actually do storytelling and allow people to tell their own stories and find the support, finding the channels within their local communities for those stories to actually reach other people. And so I think that's been really helpful because, we can tell them partner with the government and they're like, okay, great. That hasn't really gone well for us, especially the more marginalized, number of sort of intersections of identity folks hold. They've had some really difficult experiences, but to hear from organizations they trust or individuals they trust who've received funds and done really amazing, impactful work, or it's changed the livability factor of their lives, that has been much more impactful in terms of program interest and awareness.
Thanks, Jenna. And I just want to add what Kristen put in the chat, but she says we got a great response from social media posts in multiple languages. So just wanted to point that out as an opportunity for making programs more accessible. So I have a question for for Abby and other practitioners who may want to jump in here. Are there incentives for landlords to strive for more energy efficiency for their tenants?
I'm not aware of any in the places that we're working. I think we don't, the owners that are in our programs, they tend to self-select in, and to Bill's comment that we have more pipeline than we actually have funding to serve. So I think the owners that self-select in are very cognizant of tenant bills, and they really want to do the best for their residents. I think the barriers that we find are actually policy barriers around metering rules, like when we need to change the metering in a building because we don't want to increase energy burden if we're adding cooling, because heat pump, if we add heat pumps, we would add cooling. That's actually been more of a barrier in some places, is that how do we work around the policy barriers and the Public Service Commission rules to make sure that resident bills do not increase even as we're adding cleaner technologies to the buildings.
And I'll be argumentative about that, given that we live in a hot, humid climate where we're all experiencing more and more hot days, especially when we're talking to seniors. The weatherization is a good example. We're required to put heat in someone's house, even if they're in Miami. But if they don't have air conditioning, they're not going to get it. And when you talk about healthy housing, that's what keeps people from dying. If you can reduce the humidity in the house, if you can make them feel more comfortable, breathe more easily, we've really got to start thinking beyond this. Climate change is making things change, and these old standards that heat is the most important thing. Now, I'm in Florida. I've been here for 40 plus years, so I don't understand cold weather. But when people talk about we need heat for cold, I'm like going, I almost don't need heat anymore. Most all what we need really is air conditioning, and especially for people with fragile health. So we can't have one size fits all when we talk about these programs.
I think that's right. And we, in a cold weather climate in the upper Midwest, air conditioning in affordable housing was not standard. I mean, I would say almost all the buildings we go into do not have air conditioning. And it is an absolute necessity, even in the northernmost areas where we're working in, because we have so many more hot days in the summer than we had even 5 years ago. And with that air conditioning comes increased energy use. So we really take the approach, we model it, and we make sure we're not increasing any tenant energy bills.
I just want to relate this back to the earlier question about how to recruit possible participants for programs, and comfort is a good selling point. As a lot of people have said, there have been a lot more extreme weather events in the past couple of years, and maybe energy efficiency might be too abstract a concept, and sometimes you can't always promise lower energy bills immediately, but making a home more comfortable, that is something that motivates a lot of people. So yeah, when you're working on your promotional materials or your community engagement, emphasizing comfort can be very beneficial.
Thanks, Jasmine. So we have time for about 1 to 2 questions. So this question is for all participants. How do you try to assist families where wood stoves and wood burning is happening? Do you have a means of upgrading older appliances and are getting heat pumps into these homes as a primary source of heat?
I'll start. In the tribal communities that we do work in, and we're upgrading tribal housing, which is subsidized through NAHASTA by and large. Many homes do have wood stoves, and it's cultural, and so Um, for the most part, I think the housing authorities would like them removed, because they're also a fire hazard. And so I think the trade-off that we're seeing, is that as we're adding heat pumps and cooling and solar, I think that is more welcome, so we haven't really experienced a lot of pushback on some of the stove issues. But that's tribally owned housing. I think there's still a question on like incentive levels and how we do that in like owner occupied housing, because it is people are attached to their wood stoves.
We have so Seattle City Light has a program, an incentives program, and offers rebates, and they use bill inserts and all sorts of other ways to alert customers, City Light customers, heat pump and home heating and cooling rebates and water heater rebates and all sorts of things. And so I think it's a matter of really organizing the information through the website, providing the point of access through the bill insert that actually tells the story of the benefit and makes it very clear that there's a sizable and significant discount or rebate provided for those who want to move forward with making some of those changes. And so, from our perspective, when we're looking at projects, we're looking at, the degree to which we can leverage all of these various resources that the city has in place to help folks actually make the largest number of facility improvements or home improvements possible.
Thanks, Jenna. So it's actually time for our 15-minute break. Up next, we have the breakout rooms where you will have the opportunity to continue the conversation with practitioners. But this time you'll be able to turn your camera on, you'll be able to unmute yourself, you can network with your peers and have an open conversation about best practices, challenges, and your goals. And we are encouraging participants to turn their cameras on and be prepared to speak in the breakout room. So if you aren't interested in the participation piece of this workshop, then this is a good time for you to drop off if you'd like, and thank you so much for joining us, and please be on the lookout for workshop materials and information about future workshops. But for those of you who are interested in participating in the breakout session and want to talk to a practitioner and continue to ask questions, please come back at 3:10 p.m. Eastern. Thank you so much, and we will see you soon.
How do we get thrown into these different groups? Are y'all gonna set that up for us?
Bill, you will be put into a specific room that has been assigned to you. And then participants will be able to pick and choose. I'll have more details after the break is up.
The room has
But you don't have to worry about anything. You'll be put right into your room.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. We're gonna start the breakout rooms in 1 minute. So if you can turn your screen on, get ready for the breakout activity in a moment. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks to those who have decided to stay for the participatory section of this workshop. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And again, a great opportunity for you to hear more from our practitioners and network with each other. So we're going to be going into breakout rooms. You're going to receive a Zoom prompt for the breakout room, and you can join any breakout room that you'd like based on who you'd like to hear more from. So if you see on the slide here, we have assigned rooms. You can jump from room to room based on who you're interested in hearing from, and whether you want to speak to multiple facilitators, or if you just want to speak to one, you can stay in one room. You can do whatever works for you. And again, I encourage you to turn your camera on and come prepared to ask questions and also share your experiences. So the plan is to reconvene around 3:40, 3:45 Eastern time for a quick debrief and some polls. So Krista, please feel free to get those going.
Annika, I don't think I can join any rooms.
Taylor, you can't?
I don't think so. It's not giving me the option. I wonder if it's because I'm presenting.
Why don't you stop presenting? No one needs to present during the breakout rooms.
Okay. It didn't change anything.
I can send you to a room if you'd like.
Oh yeah, thanks, Krista. Just send me anywhere.
You can hop. Do you want to hop around, Taylor? Krista?
Yeah, I do. But yeah, it looks like I can assign people.
Is there a blue join button?
Oh, I see. It's all the way at the bottom. I see it now. Yeah. I think I
It does
can
look
do
like the city of Seattle and the Philadelphia Energy Authority has like half the participants. Yeah, of the other two rooms. Do you
Thanks, I'll
want to
join
do one of
those.
those?
Yeah.
And if folks are still trying to decide which room to join, I'll just flag some like highlights from some of these. So room 1, St. John's Housing Partnership. This is based in Florida, and they incorporate health and safety upgrades into all the work that they do. So if you're interested in that, that might be a reason to join. The Boston Mayor's Office of Housing is doing a pilot for green and healthy homes. They're spending up to $50,000 per unit of, I believe it's 1 to 4 unit properties there. The city of Seattle, the person we have on the call, worked on an effort to do really deep community engagement to co-create a program there that works directly with community members on their priorities for funding housing projects. The Philadelphia Energy Authority is an example of a one-stop shop that combines multiple funding sources in a single program. And then the Energy Navigator program in Wisconsin is for small to medium multifamily properties. And they have affordability requirements for landlords' buildings to be able to participate in the program. So hopefully that helps.
Balance of strategy.
What was that? Okay. Everyone who hasn't joined yet, are you having any like technical difficulties joining a breakout? Okay. Annie, do you know which breakout you want to go to? You can put it in the chat. Yeah, just put the breakout you want and Krista can assign you. Or actually, I think I could also assign you. Oh, where are the options? If you click on more, there should be a breakout rooms option, and then it should pop up. Are folks seeing that when you click on more? Okay. And then you can scroll down and see all the options. But let us know if you want us to assign you. Great. Okay, and for the 10 folks remaining here, I'm going to assume that you're still on your break. And Krista, maybe just periodically, maybe we should put a note in the chat and then periodically just talk to folks and note that they can join the break, that we're in breakouts.
Sure, sounds good.
Okay, do you want to put the note in the chat or do you want me to?
Oh yeah, I can.
Okay, I'm gonna go join a room.
All right, sounds good.
Thanks.
Okay, so I hope that you all had fruitful conversations in your breakout rooms and got the opportunity to learn something new and connect with others. We're gonna do a quick poll question to begin, just to get a sense of where everyone is at coming out of these conversations. So the question is, what is an action you'd like to prioritize in the creation or implementation of your program? And I know that I'm sure you'd all like to select more than one, but which one would you want to prioritize coming out of this workshop? Okay, so we're seeing create an easy to use program, intake participation and support process.
I feel like this is an unfair question because there are like 5 or 10 best practices nested under each of them, and each of them is so rich and so interesting.
Right. Well, if you want to learn more about each of the actions, definitely visit the R2E2 playbook. If someone can add it in the chat so that you can get some more details about each action. You know, I feel like we just touched the surface today, and there are 40 best practices across all 12 actions, and so there's a lot to dig into. Right, seeing design equitable engagement activities, prioritize the most energy insecure low and moderate income households to receive upgrades. Great. So far we've had 85% participation. I think we can end this poll. All right. And now we're going to do a word cloud. So if you look on the right side of your screen, you'll see a polling app from Slido. If you can just click on the blue open button, it should open up. Because I'm not seeing any active polls on Slido. Just bear with us a moment while we figure out. Okay, yeah, so feel free to describe your main takeaways from the breakout session using one word, or add in a sentence, whatever works for you. You can also include several submissions. All right, so I'm seeing creativity, resourceful, contractor engagement, complex, absolutely. Collaboration, yes, that's very, very important. Hope. Well, I'm glad that all of the information that you got today is giving you hope and hopefully motivating you as you develop programs. Yes, Annika, I love these words too. yeah, the work that we're doing is all very, very complex. But again, it's very important work. And at the end of the day, I think we'll all be proud of ourselves for the impact that we're going to have. Please feel free to add in any final words before we move on to the closing. Great, Krista, feel free to close the poll and we can open up the slides. Thank you. So we are reaching the conclusion of the workshop. Again, thank you all so much for joining. I mentioned that the recording and the materials will be available on the EPA website. You can access this website to learn more about future workshops, and just kind of tying it all in together. These workshops may help you implement some of the actions and best practices that we spoke about today. Next slide. So again, here's a list of past and upcoming workshops. You can access materials of past workshops and also stay tuned on the upcoming workshops. The next workshop is taking place on September 10th. And similar to this one, it's going to be 3 hours and there will be a presentation and interactive piece as well. And that workshop will be on centering affordability and low-income electrification programs. The announcement and registration will be made available very soon, so please be on the lookout for that. And again, thank you so much for attending today's workshop, asking such amazing questions, and participating in the breakout sessions. I hope that you all have a great day, and I hope to see you at future workshops. Thank you.